In this video, we are going to start getting the knowledge to create layouts. This is what is going to allow us to position the elements in our website where we want them to be. We have already seen that all HTML elements are boxes that have a default position. Block elements stack vertically, one on top of the other, and inline elements sit horizontally, one next to the other. This default position is called the normal flow, and in order to create functional layouts, it's crucial to modify that normal flow. Let's see how to do it. There are two main CSS properties we can use to modify the normal flow. Those are position and float. But those are not the only ways to modify the position of an element in order to create layouts. We can also use what we can call layout systems. Those are flexboxes and grid. We are going to see a little about flexboxes later, but grid systems are totally outside of the scope of that course. Let's start with the position property. In the normal flow, an element has position static, but we can modify the position of that element by modifying the values of the position property. Those values that property can get are static, which is the one for the normal flow, relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. Besides the position property, we usually provide some offset values to specify where to place the element from a reference point. To do so, we use the properties top, right, bottom, and left, and we give to them a numeric value, usually in pixels or percentage. Let's see each one of the values for the position property. Static, as we have said, is the default value. The element will just follow the normal flow. With relative, we can move the element, and it is going to be moved relative to its default position. The original space that was occupied by the element in the normal flow will appear as a blank space, because the element is not removed from the normal flow. Let's see an example to visually see what all this means. We have this class that modifies the position of these three elements. Here is how those elements are going to be rendered in the default position, in the static position. This is how they are shown in the normal flow. And here is how they are going to be rendered when we apply this class to the second element. We are defining the position of the second element to be relative and with an offset of 50 pixels from the bottom and 70 pixels from the left. What does this mean? The first and last elements are not going to move, and the second one, that is the one affected by the class, is going to be moved 50 pixels from the bottom and 70 pixels from the left, taking as a reference its original position, the position it has in the normal flow. It's important to notice that the space originally taken by the element is left there. We have that blank space here. This is because the element is not removed from the normal flow, and this is why the rest of the elements stay in their original positions, they don't move. This is important, and we will see how things are different with the absolute position. With position absolute, the element is moved relative to the nearest parent element that has any other position value than static. If there is no parent element with a position with a non-static position, the reference element will be the window, or better, the viewport. This is the visible area of the screen. If we don't give an offset value, the element is going to be placed on the top left corner of the non-static parent element, or the viewport. With position relative, if we don't give an offset value, the element does not move. It stays in the original position in the normal flow. With absolute position, the element is removed from the normal flow. This is why the space it was taken by the element is also removed. We don't see the blank space that we saw with the position relative element when it was moved. Let's see an example. This is the viewport, and we have an element with class outer that has position relative. That means that if we place any element with position absolute inside it, the outer element will be the reference point from which the offset will be applied to move the element. If we remove the outer element, the absolute positioned element will be positioned relative to the viewport, meaning the viewport is going to be taken as the reference point. Let's add a class declaring the position as absolute for an element with class 2. This element will take as a reference point the top left corner of the viewport and be moved 50 pixels from the top and 20 from the left. Let's add back the outer element and see how position absolute behaves. Let's see it with the same set of elements we saw before. The element with position absolute is removed from the normal flow, and consequently the elements that are placed after it in the DOM are also moved to occupy the space left by that element. And then the element with position absolute is placed in its new position, which in this case is 50 pixels from the top and 20 from the left, taking as a reference the top left corner of the outer element. Remember, with position absolute, the element is removed from the normal flow, so there is no blank space left. And now let's see the next value for the position property, which is position fixed. Fixed works similar to absolute position, but with the reference point always the viewport, and the element stays fixed in its position when we scroll the page. It's what we use to create those fixed navigation bars so common in websites. The element is placed in the spot we specify with the offset values, in this case top 0 and left 0, always relative to the viewport, remember, and stays there even if we scroll the page. This is how it works. Pretty handy, right? Let's now see position sticky. It works similar to fixed, but the element will scroll with the document until the specified position is reached. Let's see an example. We have a sticky positioned element some pixels away from the top of the window, and the offset specified for that element is top 0. That means that the element will scroll with the page until it reaches that position. When the element reaches the top of the viewport, it stays fixed. And we are done with the position property. Let's now see the float property, which can be a little tricky, but it's very useful in order to help us position the elements where we want in our layout. The float property is used to move the element to the left or to the right of its parent or of the viewport. Let's create some HTML code and some CSS to see how it works. We have this HTML code and this CSS, and this is what is rendered in the browser. We have the outer div with the blue border, and inside we have this yellow box that is the paragraph, and the item element that is the one that is floated. As you can see, the P element has not been moved. It has just made some room for the item div, for the item element. This behavior may sound familiar because this is what usually happens with text and images, right? Text tend to wrap around images. And this is what the float property was created for. The float property was originally created to allow text to wrap around images, and it works great for that, but this behavior may not be what we want in other cases. Let's see an example. We have a set of block elements that are displayed one on top of the other according to the normal flow. Now, if we add the float property to the element with class 1, what will happen is that the rest of the elements are going to wrap around it. This wrapping behavior may result in an undesired position for one or more elements sometimes, but no problem, because we can use another CSS property, the clear property, to prevent the elements from wrapping around the floated element. Let's see how this clear property works. We add the property clear to the element we want to display below the floated element. Let's add the property clear set to both to the element with class 2. With clear both, we are telling the browser to do not place any element next to the element with class 2, neither on the left side or on the right side. It's like adding some kind of line break or something similar. We can also clear elements only on the right side or on the left side. With clear left, for example, we are telling the browser to do not place any element next to the element with class 2 on the left side. We can keep elements on the right side of the element though. Sometimes floated elements have weird behaviors. Let's see one very common of those strange things that happens with floats. We have a div element with the class outer that contains 3 elements with the float property. When we have this special setup, one parent element containing only floated elements, one strange thing happens, and is that the parent collapses. It will be shown like a line instead of like a box. If the outer element doesn't have a background or a border, this doesn't matter because we are going to see nothing in the browser. But if we want to show the background color or the border, this may be a problem. And this is why we need to know how to fix this. There are basically 2 main ways of fixing this. The first one is using the overflow property. What we do is set that property to hidden. Let me explain what the overflow property is and what it does. Here we have a container and an element whose content is larger than the container, so it overflows it. With overflow hidden, the content that will overflow the container is not shown. Overflow can also have other values, like visible, which will just show the content that overflows the container, and scroll, that will add scroll bars to the container. Another way of fixing the problem is using what we call the clear fix hack. This is adding a hidden content that is not floated and clearing it. To do it, we use the after pseudo element. Do you remember it? It allows us to add content to the HTML from the CSS. There are different versions of that hack. All of them imply adding something, clearing the element, and displaying this in some way. I like to add nothing, an empty string, clear on both sides, and then display as a table. Why display table? Just because the size of the table is going to adapt to the size of the content. This is the only reason. You can also use display block or display inline block. It's going to work also. And we are done with floats. They may not be the ideal way of creating layouts, but until recently it was the only way to go. Now we have better options like flexboxes and grid. We are going to see flexboxes later, but we still need to know how to use floats because they are still widely used, especially in combination with flexboxes. So let's go to Visual Studio Code and apply what we have learned by creating the layout of our website. Here we are in Visual Studio and we are going to keep creating the layout of our website because, as you may remember, we already created the sections and give some style. So let's keep building from here. We're going to focus now on creating the layout for desktop screens. Later we will see how to make it responsive so that we can see it correctly in tablets and mobile phones. What we have so far is good because we want our sections to be displayed vertically, one below the other, and this is what we have because the div elements and the rest of semantic elements, as you may recall, are block elements, and block elements are displayed one on top of the other by default, and this is what we want. Now let's start adding the inner content of each one of those sections. The nav section will contain a logo and a menu. So let's add an image for the logo and a list of elements for the menu. To add an image, we use the img tag. What we're going to do instead of writing the whole syntax is use emmet to help us write our HTML. So let's type img and press the tab key. In case you don't remember what is emmet, it is a plugin for Visual Studio Code and other code editors that help us write our code, our HTML code, because we write a shortcut and it generates the HTML for us. Pretty handy, right? This is the HTML code for an image. As you can see, it has two attributes. The first one is the source, meaning the path to the image. In this case, I have a logo image in the images folder. So I have to write here the path to that image, meaning I have to go to the image folder and choose the logo file inside that folder. Then we have the alt attribute. Here we place an alternate text. This is a text that is going to be shown in case the image is not loaded. This text is also used by text readers, that are the devices that people with disabilities use to access the web. So it's important to place the alt text so that we can make the web more accessible. It is also important in terms of SEO. It seems to be one of the ranking factors that Google uses to rank web pages. So if you are concerned about ranking your page on Google, do not forget to place the alt attribute. If you don't have your own image for the logo yet, you can use a placeholder. There are some online services that serve placeholder images by typing a URL. One of them is placeholder.com. So let's go there. Let's go to placeholder.com and I will show you how to use it to have a placeholder without having to have the image in your local machine. This is the syntax you have to place in your source attribute. You have to specify the size of the image and optionally the background color and the color of the text. You can check the documentation for more options. For now, I'm just going to get that URL here and place it for the source of our image. Let's modify the size of the image. Let's make it 120 by 80 and see how it looks in the browser. A little large. I think I'm going to make it 120 by 60. Much better now. So now that we have our image, let's create the menu. A common approach when creating menus is to use lists. We will create a list containing all the items we want to show in the menu. Instead of creating the list directly next to the image, I'm going to enclose it in a div element. This is not strictly necessarily, but I like to do it to help me with the position, with the layout. And let me add an ID to this div so we can use it later to add style. To create a list, we use the UL element. This is to indicate the list itself, and LI to indicate each one of the items inside the list. We will see more about lists later, but for now this is enough. To create the list items, we are going to use emmet type li times, this is the asterisk, 6. We are telling emmet to create an li tag 6 times. And here they are. Now, inside of each one of those li elements, we are going to place a link because we want the items in the menu to be links to navigate to each one of the sections of our web page. This item is going to be the link to the bio section. I'm going to place the text about me here. You can place whatever text you like. And to create a link, we use the A tag. The A tag has the href attribute, where we specify where the link is pointing to. The text we want to show needs to be in between the A tags. And for now, in the href attribute, let's just place the hash sign. We will change that later. Let's do the same with the rest of the menu items. Let's just copy and paste the links and modify the anchor text. Skills, career, portfolio, and contact. We have an extra li element. Let's just remove it, and we are done with our menu. Then we have the header. Let's delete this content, we don't need it, and what we are going to place here is just some text inside a div, and this div is going to have a background image or a video or just some color or whatever we prefer. We will do that later. For now, let's just focus on the text, on the element we are going to place here. Let's add a paragraph here with some text. I'm just copying that from my old website and placing some break lines here. And I also want to place a little arrow in the bottom of the header to tell the user to navigate to the next section. For now, let's just create a div with a symbol, actually a capital V. It's going to be enough now. We will make it nicer later. And now let's move to the About Me section. Here we will have two subsections, one containing an image and the other one containing a piece of text. Do you remember how to add an image? Right, with the img tag that has the source attribute and the alt attribute. In the source attribute, we are going to place the path or the URL to the image we are going to use. In my case, I'm going to use one of the images I have in my local machine. This one is in the images folder and the name is brain.png, so this is the image I'm going to use. If you want to use a placeholder, remember you can go to placeholder.com and use a link to use one of the placeholder images they serve. Now let's add the alt text and our image is ready to go. For the text, I'm going to leave that text I have here. Feel free to place your own text. Remember P for paragraphs, and if you want to add a line break, BR. Then we have the skill sections. Here we will have two subsections too, one with some text and the other one with a set of bars showing the level of each one of the skills we want to show. Each skill bar is going to be a div that we are going to fill with color to show how proficiency we are for that specific skill. As the HTML code for all those skill bars is going to be the same, we can use the emmet trick we saw before to create several elements with just one line of code. Do you remember how it was? Right, using the asterisk and the times we want to repeat the element. Let me add the P tag here. We will add the text later, or you can add it now if you want to, and move to the skill bars. We want all the divs we use for the skill bars to have a class, so we can use it later for styling purposes. So what we need to do here is to add this class also to the shortcut we use in emmet. The shortcut will be the name of the element, div, dot, and the name of the class, in that case skill bar, and then the asterisk and the number of times we want to repeat the element, 7 in that case. Press tab and emmet will create the code for us. Here it is. Let me paste here some text from my website. Ready. We can move to the next section, which is the timeline for our career. This section has a similar structure to the previous ones. We have also two divs, one where we are going to place some kind of graphical element that we will create later, showing our professional or academic timeline, and another one where we are going to place some text. And from here we can move to the portfolio section, which is going to be a little different. Here we are going to show an image for some of our works, and those images are going to be displayed as a grid. This grid is going to be 4 by 3, 4 items in 3 rows. Let's make it like this for now. We can always modify this later. So we are going to need 12 div elements that we are going to create using Emmet. Let's type div.portfolioItem. This is the class we are going to give to each one of those divs. Asterisk 12 and hit tab. Here they are. Now we have to add an image inside each one of those divs, and we can do it using Emmet. Let's remove this code we have here, and I will show you how to create a child element when we create the parent using Emmet, which is a pretty handy thing. We will start by adding the code for the parent element, div.portfolioItem, and now we have to add the child element. To do so, we use the greater than symbol, and then we add the tag for the child element, image in our case. Now, as we want 12 of those div elements, we have to use the asterisk syntax, but we have to be careful here. If we add the asterisk 12 right after the image, what we are going to be cloning here is the image, and what we want to clone is the whole thing, the div element and the image. So we will need to use parentheses. Let's enclose the whole code we want to duplicate within parentheses and then add the asterisk 12. Let's press tab, and here it is, the 12 div elements with the corresponding image element inside. Let's add a placeholder for each one of the images, and for now we can leave the alt text empty. We will come back later and fill it. I would like to have the image code in its own indented line of code, so I'm going to rearrange that piece of code here. Much better. And now let's move to the contact section. Here we will also have 2 divs that I'm creating using Emmet. In the first one, we will place some text with a call to action or our contact info or whatever we want, and in the other one, a contact form. We will get into more details about forms later, but for now, let's just add the basic HTML code to create the form we need. Forms are created using the form tag. Then inside it, we will add the different fields we need. In our case, we need a text input for the user to enter his name. All input elements require a name attribute. This one is to identify that field. I'm going to give it the name because this one is for the name of the user, but we can place here any name we want. Then I will add the placeholder attribute, which is optional. Here we enter the text we want to show before the user fills the field. I'm going to place here your name. Then we need another field for the user to enter his email. This is going to be an input of type email. Let's give it a name of email and the placeholder your email. Let's create another text field for the subject, and for the message content, let's use a text area element. And there is just one more thing left, and it's the button to send a message. We are going to create it with the input element, this time of the type submit, and in the value we place the text we want to show in the button. And we are done with the contact section. Let's move to the footer, which is the final part of our website, and here we will place the social media links and the copyright. Let's create a div for the social media links and give it an ID that we are going to use later. To display the icons with the links to our social media sites, I will use a list. Do you remember how we create a list? Right, with the UL element and LI for the list items. Each list item is an image that is a link. Let's create that with Emmet. We need an LI element, and this one is going to have a child element, that is the link. Remember the A tag for the link. And this one has another child that is an image. This is why we use the greater than symbols here. And we want all these 4 times because we are going to display 4 social media links. So parentheses, asterisk 4. Nice. Let me rearrange this code for clarity and add the source for the images and the alt text. We also need to add the links to our social media profiles. I will add the one for Twitter now and do the rest later. Let's now open the page in the browser, and this is what we have. All the elements are displayed according to the normal flow. Block elements are displayed one on top of the other, and inline elements, like the ones in the form, are displayed one next to the other. Let's now see how to fix this, but this is going to be in the next video. Thanks for watching.